Remember that quite well, an NCAA team, and here's Lees-McRae leading late in the second half. What? Anyway, yes. So here we go. I'll bring you on very shortly now. Well, yes, I can hear you, Mr. Jennings, and all of the Tri-Cities is about ready to hear the wisdom of probably the most beloved basketball figure in the Tri-Cities area. I don't know, do you consider Banner Elk, North Carolina, where you are right now, part of the Tri-Cities area? Because really, you would Johnson County and Carter County, and you're just right over the border. What do you think about that? Can we call you guys part of the Tri-Cities over there at Lees-McRae?
Yes, I believe so. We're close enough, and I'm sure I've been back and forth quite a bit to feel like it's close enough. So, yeah, let's include this in the Tri-Cities.
All right, I can certainly the region, if you will. Hey, one of the things, and I always mention this all day, people who don't know, I mention the stat a lot. When you left ETSU, you were college basketball's second leading assist man of all time. And I want to, because you're now coaching Lees-McRae, and if I've asked you this question before, forgive me, but I was once told by Agnes Baronato, who is a famous women's basketball coach, Georgia Tech and at Pitt, that her thing and the difference between coaching men and women is that women want to pass the rock and men always want to shoot the rock. Well, that then said, wait a minute, this great assist man, Keith Jennings, women's basketball, that must be right along the lines of your coaching and basketball philosophies. Do you find that to be the case when you're coaching women now?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I do think that, the women, from what I've seen just in my first year of coaching, they want to learn. And I think the men, they already think they know everything. And that was probably one of the biggest differences. On the women's side, it just seems like I just got to make sure I keep giving them confidence and building them up. Where on the men's side, they already feel like they're the one.
Well,
that's probably the biggest difference in coaching both. But like I said, it's basketball is basketball, and what I am finding out is the workouts that I will put my guys through, the women can handle the same workouts, and I think that's going to be one of the things that makes a difference in our program.
And that's the male ego too. I mean, I would imagine that is as much as anything, would you we know about it. We're both men here. I mean, would you agree with that one of the reasons why trying to be a bit of a ball hog, maybe as a point guard, it wasn't anything that you really had a problem with, but you were known to put a lot of points on the board as well. Not that anyone really complained about it because you also made all the other players around you better. But, there was a circus, the male, do you think that's, part of the male ego, why, you might have, more players taking bad shots than rather passing to the open man in men's basketball?
No doubt. And I think that's one of the things I learned. I think any basketball player, that has success in high school, and I think a lot of it is position-based, and I know the game has changed now where you've got scoring point guards. As when I was coming through, we were more traditional set-you-up point guards. And I think one of the main things for me was just the sacrifice, because I was a two-guard in high school. I scored over like 1,700 points, and, we didn't have the three-point line. So I got a lot of buckets. But when I came to East Tennessee State, I quickly realized that, okay, I wasn't going to be the two-guard, and I knew I could pass the ball. So I just sacrificed my scoring to an extent and made sure I got everybody involved, but at the same time, I still scored over 1,900 points in college. So, I just learned to understand to pick my spots, and, I think that's a lot of things that some men don't want to do. They don't want to sacrifice. They would rather, get the glory and hopefully go overseas or play in the NBA, where I was dreaming of that, but at the same time, I knew if I just played very consistently throughout the years, then good things would happen. And that was kind of like my mentality all through high school and college.
Well, we're talking to Keith Jennings. He is the head women's coach at Lees-McRae and, of course, a local legend at ETSU and played in 3 NCAA tournaments himself. I guess the big thing that I took from this weekend's action, And I mean, this is such a scribe thing. This is such a media thing. But you're a coach now, so I want to ask you: was not necessarily the seesaw game between Duke and Kansas, but rather the post-game interview, Dana Jacobson and Lewis Hamilton, and for that matter, Kenny Smith's, I thought, very legitimate criticism of why didn't you foul? There was just enough time for 2 possessions left and maybe a miracle comeback, Florida State, and you'd been so hot. So you're a coach now. Let me ask you, when you were watching that game, were you also like Kenny Smith in front of the set going, foul, foul, you still have a chance? Was that your reaction?
Yes. I mean, in these tournaments, when it's win or go home, I think you should exhaust all avenues as to get the game prolonged or make the game longer through free throws. And yeah, I was kind of surprised, but at the same time, I could see what the coach from Florida State was thinking about. I mean, down 4, less than 6 seconds left. I mean, I understand. I mean, I felt like he felt like his team had worked really hard, and it just wasn't going to be a chance for them winning this game. But at the same time, I think if he had to do it all over again, I think he probably would tell his kids to foul because, like you said, anything can happen. You can foul. They can go down and miss the free throws. You come down and maybe get fouled and get a 3-point, which turn into a 4-point play possibly, or you get a free throw, miss it, tap it back out, and hit a lucky shot. I mean, the chances of those things happening are slim, but it could happen. I think in those tournament scenarios, when it's win or go home, I'm not a fan of fouling. When you're up 3 and they say foul, but you can't get the shot off. Mm-hmm. I'm really not a fan of that. But in the tournament scenario, I would because I think it gives my team the best chance of getting the victory.
I'm not a big fan of it either. And I mean, I know that at ETSU you didn't play Dean Smith in North Carolina. I know in '87, I think that was a year before you got there, they did, and it was a huge route for UNC. It was stacked at the time. But one of the things I know is that Dean Smith, and Kenny Smith, of course, played for Dean Smith. I mentioned this on Marky's monologue, Mr. Jennings. Always, if there was any question, it was just fundamental basketball. Seemed like he always had 2 timeouts in his pocket, and he was fouling. And I know you're from Culpeper, Virginia. You probably watched a lot of, Terry Holland versus Dean Smith games growing up and all that. So, and you know that to be the case as well. I mean, if there was any inkling that the Tar Heels could still pull this one out, they were fouling. They were trying to. They made those last minutes to last a long time, but it was fun to watch because it was all strategic and such. Leads me to my next question, though, and you're standing with coaches right now. We're hearing a lot about, coaches now, they're hired for their personalities relating to not only the media, but the millennial generation and such. My question is, why can't coaches be good strategists and personable? Is there any reason whatsoever why they couldn't be? I think it's a crutch for to make excuses for poor strategy when they're talking about that. But what are your thoughts? I mean, why couldn't a coach be both personable and a good strategist?
I mean, I think society, Marky, the society we live in, they're always going to find something wrong. I think in today's coaching, it seems like it's never enough. If you can relate to the kids and they don't perform well, then they say you're not a good motivator. Or if your team underachieves and they pick well, then they say you like you just said, you're not a good strategist. I just think a lot of coaches just have to be confident in what they know. That's one of the things that I've been using to my advantage. I played at the top levels. I played in high school and I played in college, and I was ultimately confident in my abilities. So when I'm coaching, I run along the same type of morals that I did as a basketball player. So I just think some people will definitely be blessed enough to be able to get their point across from what they did, and then some people just got to work a little bit harder. Because one thing I'm understanding for sure in this coaching, these young kids, they respect that you've been there. Not saying they don't respect the coaches that didn't play, but I know just through my 9 years of coaching now, playing in the NBA garners me a lot more respect than not having played in the NBA.
I agree with that, and I'm hearing that more and more, and it leads me to believe I'm a baseball guy and such, and Charlie Manuel is probably the greatest manager the Phillies ever had. Actually, years ago, got his start as a hitting coach with the Cleveland Indians. He was a 198 hitter lifetime in the major leagues. And I'm thinking he could not have gotten that job today. He happened to be from near where the manager of the Indians at the time was from, and they were both personality types and all this that were similar. But you're absolutely right. I mean, did you play against MJ? I'm sure you've heard that question from recruits, that sort of thing. And
exactly.
Doing it is a big thing today in today's sports world. I've got about 45 seconds left, but let me ask you this. We'll take a break, and if you can continue, okay. I know you're with some coaches, but how big of a surprise is Loyola? Can you tell me in just a few words?
Man, of course, I feel out of bracket because I always like trying to say I'm going to get everything right, but it never happens. But this year, I got 3 of the 4 Final Four picks right, and Loyola was the only one I missed. Now that I'm looking at it, I hope they win it. I really would like to see the underdog continue to get more respect because the underdogs in Division I basketball and Division II and Division III, I would think that if you don't have the best teams already, then people aren't taking it seriously. And I think this is a team that kind of reminds me of other these states about us like advancing like they have, but these kids are a lot of them are 4-year guys. They've been around for a while. They're not intimidated by the big schools, and it's making for a great sport. So, Michigan is going to be a big test for them. And I really like the way Michigan is playing. And if they happen to get by Michigan, then it's going to face either Kansas or Villanova, which will only make the story sweeter if they were able to finish the deal. Now, will they do it? I don't know, but I'm almost sure with the sister that's helping them out and with the way they believe in each other, I believe they have to think they can win all of this. So it's going to be, I can't wait for this weekend to come up and see where it all goes.
I'm told that Villanova has a chaplain as well. Hey, let's